welcome to BizBlend listeners, the show where business meets mindset and strategy meets soul. Now, today's guest isn't here to give you another 5 step or 6 step success formula. He is here to tell you the truth. Joining us is Charles Browne. He is a leadership and peak performance coach, nuclear attack submarine warfare veteran, and the author of The Pursuit of Identity and Purpose. So, listeners, Charles helps high stake leaders stop solving the wrong problems and finally reconnect with what actually matters. So, if you have been checking all the right boxes, scaling, hustling, achieving, doing everything you could do, but you still feel off, disconnected, frustrated, or drained, I'm very sure this conversation is for you. We are diving deep into the invisible patterns behind burnout, misaligned success, and motivation crashes. Because maybe deep down there, you are not stuck. You are just out of alignment. So let's quickly get into the discussion, listeners. So, Charles, welcome to the show, and I'm really honored to have you here with us.
Oh, no, the pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Okay, Charles, you say high performers, they often burn out doing all the right things. That is true. That is true. I 100% agree with you. So I want to understand, and for the listeners as well, what is the core misalignment that causes this? Is it the burden of performing the best every time? Even when externally they are winning, but they are not feeling that win within them.
Yeah, typically what I discover is that misalignment is much further upstream than even that. The misalignment ends up occurring very early in our personal and professional lives when we pursue perhaps an industry or a career, maybe something that we're very good at,
Mhm.
but not necessarily something that really lights our fire and gets us excited. So that type of burnout isn't the typical burnout where, oh, I've just been working so hard lately, I need a break. It's more of a chronic, very slow burnout where people, leaders especially, become very disenchanted with what they're doing on a day to day basis.
Hmm. Yeah, but that makes sense, because I have seen because I've worked in the startup setting as well, and this is also kind of my own entrepreneurial journey. I have seen
Mhm.
so many founders, they chase growth, but they kind of still feel empty inside, and that can be such a slippery slope for them. So I would love to hear, Charles, how this identity drift shows up even at the top.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So again, we have these external metrics, right? Especially in the entrepreneurial world. We have so many opportunities, we have so many great ideas, all of us do. And then those of us who actually take action on it and start chasing that idea and start to try to bring that to life, something happens along the way where the mission overshadows the individual. And as an entrepreneur, there is, in my opinion, there is no such thing as work life balance. If you're an entrepreneur, your work is your life is your work, because so much of what you do is a reflection of your identity. So the problem comes when we start taking a lot of external success advice that says, oh, you just need to hustle more. You just need to do more. You just need to implement this strategy. You just need to do this. All of those sound like really good advice, and they may actually have a ton of success metrics behind them that says, "Oh, this definitely works," but
Mhm.
does it work for you? And the answer to that question is, well, it depends who you are, what motivates you, and what pushes you forward, and what brings satisfaction and joy into your life. For me, I tend to create a grid for all my clients that aligns our personal values with our emotional needs profile. which sounds really woo-hoo, sounds like it doesn't really have a place in high pressure, high speed, high tech entrepreneurialism. But the truth is that matters more than anything because it's the cornerstone of all of our success. If your values are out of alignment with what you do on a day to day basis, if
Mhm.
your job and your title are not fulfilling in an emotional way, you're going to run out of steam. You're going to run out of enthusiasm and energy for that mission. So the misalignment happens when we chase after something and think that the outcome is what's going to make us happy. When truthfully, we're all starting to learn and understand and believe it's actually the journey that makes us happy. It is the struggle that makes us happy, but it's got to be a struggle that's aligned to what we believe is important and valuable in life.
I have so much to say on this, Charles, because it's not only valid in in entrepreneurship, but in our um, work also. I mean, I had personally experienced this. If when I was kind of not aligned or internally deep into what I am delivering in terms of my output, I couldn't even do the basic things, which I were good at, which I was known for. Like my managers or my colleagues used to identify that, okay, I'm good at this and I is good at this. That kind of, threw me completely off the road. I mean, that really surprised me. And that kind of completely pushed me deep down into the rabbit hole. And then there was COVID, then there was layoff, and then kind of scouring through whatever options are available, just for, the money to pay your bills, that kind
Right.
of phase. And then, um, I mean, I should really express gratitude to the people I was acquainted with, I were acquainted with that they gave me the chance to be a part of podcasting, and I left everything behind and took a huge, huge risk. But it definitely is true. It definitely is valid, and entrepreneurship is not, everyone's cup of tea. Not everyone
Right.
can do it. I mean, yes, they could do it, from I'm just not generalizing everything from skill or capability, but then there are so many factors to consider. Because yes, for an entrepreneur, there is no work-life balance. You're working on Saturdays and Sundays, but then physically you may feel that you are tired. You are really, really physically tired. But then when you're doing something that fulfills you internally, your soul, your soul will say, okay, I'll take a break, but then let me do this as well because this is something really valuable to me.
Absolutely. True alignment fuels you.
Yeah.
When leaders are operating outside of their values or their emotional needs, even any success feels hollow
Yeah.
because you've put in all this effort for something and you've I, I typically warn my clients, be
Mhm.
careful about the prizes that you win because you may be winning prizes that you don't really want. And the system may reward the behavior and the effort, but your body and your soul keep the score. And they know that that really wasn't as fulfilling as I would hoped it had been. We've all read the stories of the multimillionaires who have no family, no friends, no life, no satisfaction. They're miserable people. And there's no better example of a misalignment of values and needs with success. Because again, outwardly, the metric, oh my goodness, you started this company and you created all these jobs and you have this wonderful product and you're making all this money, but I'm miserable because that's not what I wanted to do, right? Uh, yeah.
Yeah, you wanted to say something, Charles.
No, no, no. I was gonna let you go. Definitely.
Yeah.
Because I'll just keep going and go.
I know, I know, I know. This is so true because um especially during COVID and after COVID, we have seen so many people now wanting to start something on their own, become solopreneurs or startups and everything. But once again, it is a slippery slope. It can be really rewarding, but then you can also have, you know, some surprising realizations that maybe this is not something for me. And I really kind of appreciate that I got this opportunity. But then, yes, as you very rightfully mentioned, that if you are misaligned, even if you have everything external with you, externally validated that you are making money, you are giving jobs to people, you are creating jobs, but then internally you are not feeling yourself.
Right. Right.
So Charles also, yeah, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that, and there's a lot of ways and a lot of reasons why no one talks about this,
Mm.
right? Because we glorify the hustle
Mm.
and we mistake it for mastery. We think, again, we glorify somebody who works 60, 70, 80 hours a week for months on end to launch some product and they have some sales. And we think, oh my goodness, like they just crushed it. These guys are masters. No, no, they're not. No, they're not. I'm sorry. That's not mastery of yourself. That's not mastery of your state. And that I guarantee you, no matter how much success came from that, you didn't tap into nearly all of your potential if it wasn't aligned to who you are as a person and your values and your needs. Um, and then there's this constant fear that if we slow down or stop, we'll lose relevance. We'll
Mm.
lose that status. And that becomes a really, really unhealthy driver because, again, you're placing all your value as a human being on this external metric. And the market is very, very unforgiving. So you better love your business and you better love your industry because it fuels you, not because you're chasing some external validation, approval, whatever the case may be. Right. So most peak performers that I know, they only seek help after they crash. I've had very rare occasions where clients have actually contacted me ahead of time and said, hey, I just took over this brand new role of this organization. It's a big deal. It feels like very large shoes to fill. I'm starting to do all this stuff. And they were smart enough to say, I recognize that I'm in a new space and I need help with that. But for most people, they wait until they crash and they wait till everything comes down. Again, because of this cycle of us glorifying the hustle
Mm.
and thinking that your success only comes from, fill in the blank.
Mm. Then I feel embarrassed to ask for help. And because they think, oh, I've been a high achiever all my life. I have achieved everything on myself. This will be really embarrassing for me to go and ask out for help. Let me figure it out on my own and then I'll see what happens.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And our parents and our teachers, bless their hearts, they want the best for us and they want us to be safe and they want us to have a wonderful career and they want us to make good money so that we can be safe and live a happy life. But truthfully, a lot of the feedback that we got was really, really actually very unhealthy,
Okay.
which is celebrating the grade on that exam as opposed to celebrating the effort that you put into studying for that exam, regardless of what the outcome was. I am by no stretch of the imagination am I a perfect parent. However, I did recognize in my children very early. I have one son and one daughter.
Mhm.
This one is really good at math, just does math in their head. Oh my goodness, good for you. Math has always been easy. Not so much of an artist, doesn't really like to read very much, at least not for pleasure. Okay, I'm not going to force that child to be someone who they are not, but instead I tried to make an effort to have them lean into their strengths. So many of us develop through the educational system and then through our professional lives, especially our early professional lives, to hyper focus on our shortcomings and our weaknesses. There's this impression that success equals you're great at everything. And that's not true. It's not true at all. The best performing people that I know, the happiest people and the most successful people I know themselves,
Mhm.
know their strengths, and lean into their strengths. We only discuss or face shortcomings or faults, if you will, weaknesses, when it's holding them back from doing what they're really aligned to do. And there's a couple different ways to do that. It's not necessarily your job to fix your weaknesses. It's your job to acknowledge them and recognize them and then figure out, okay, what's the solution? And sometimes the solution is outsource it. Outsource it to someone else who is really good in that space, because I could take 10 hours of my time to try to figure this out and do it myself, but because it's not my strength, somebody else could be doing it in an hour and a half or 2 hours. That just doesn't make sense. But again, we're driven so hard to hyper focus on those weaknesses and think and lead ourselves to believe that we have to be great at everything, and that's the only way to be successful. And truth is, we end up spending 80% of our time working on weaknesses and faults that are never going to be good enough. They're never going to be good enough. I choose to spend my time developing my strengths more and more and more. And every hour I put into that is worth 1,000 hours.
Absolutely. That's beautifully put, Charles. And talking about, uh, when I was reading your intro, your experiences are really interesting. I mean, you have been a warfare veteran, and in those situations, decision making is such a super critical, kind of skill that you need. And you need clarity, conviction, confidence. There can be situations, uh, which I guess even entrepreneurs, they'll think that, oh my goodness, I don't want to have that kind of fear lingering around me. So what role does fear based decision making play in sabotaging growth? And how can leaders tell when their choices are rooted in fear disguised as logic? Something like the market is crashing. Okay, let me just quickly, uh, hire more people or lay off more people and make sure my numbers are right. Something like that, as an example.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, fear-based decision making rarely creates a great result. I think we're all aware of that.
Mhm.
Leaders who exercise a lot of fear-based decision making, or who lack the confidence to make big decisions, important decisions, critical decisions, or timely decisions, typically are lacking one of two things. Either they're not as technically astute in their area as they should be, given their role and given the magnitude of the decisions that they're making, because there is something to be said for how well do you know your space and how well do you know your industry. Now, for me, specifically speaking about my military background, it was training and drills all the time so that when emergencies did occur, you use the word confidence. I don't know if it was confidence as much as I know what the right thing to do is or the most correct thing. So it wasn't always a perfect answer, but I do know that these are my priorities. This is the most important thing. This is the second most important thing. So I know that my decision making at least has to follow this hierarchy of most important to least important. Where leaders get in trouble is when the most important thing on their decision making priority list is their status or their ego. That's when we start making fear based decisions, because when the decision for an organization or the company or whatever it is becomes about us, that is just a very bad model. I'm sure you can see that, and I'm sure our listeners can recognize and identify with that very quickly. Yeah, I shouldn't be making decisions for myself. There's a lot of people counting on me to make this decision. So there is a level of technical acumen that is required to make sound decisions. You should be very well versed and very well read in your space so that you have that logical, rational decision making side. The other side, though, is why am I here? Why does this business exist? And what are those priorities outside of me and my personal needs? What are the needs of the organization? And how do those align with our organizational priorities in this moment?
Hmm. Yeah. And this is so relevant because in business, fear can wear a mask of practicality. So it's really very critical to recognize, learn to recognize this earlier. So, Charles, before we wrap up, I know we are short on time, but this can be such an interesting conversation. So, let's talk about where do we start. So, when someone feels off, but they can't explain why, what is the first question they should ask themselves to start moving back into alignment? Any first step or,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's so I hesitate because there's a lot of hyperbole in the coaching and consulting world. And things, ideas, concepts, strategies tend to get boiled down to some really, sexy catchphrase, right? Know your why. There's truth in that, but there's so much more to that phrase than just know your why. So many of us will sit down and say, "My why is I need a place to live." Like, come on, I need to pay my bills. That's why. Okay, that's true. I'm being a little facetious. But truthfully, the answer to I feel like things are off, I'm not where I thought I was going to be in life, or worse, I am where I thought I was going to be in life, and I am completely disheartened with what it actually looks like. And or I check all the boxes. This was my example in my experience. I checked all the boxes. I had all the stuff. I had the titles. I all those things, and it was like, eh, is this really it? I did everything that everybody told me to do. So if you're starting to feel that in the back of your mind and you're starting to ask questions like that, here's the catchy coaching phrase, right? Which is you are out of alignment. Okay, but what does that mean? How do I get in alignment? How do I even know? And that starts with, for me and my clients, it starts with an identity audit.
Okay.
Aside from your title, aside from your roles, aside from the masks that you wear every day and who you're trying to be, who are you authentically? Who were you when you were a kid? Were you silly? Were you, just completely crazy and jumping off of porches and jumping into rivers? Were you a singer? Were you a performer? Understanding who you are at your core is the first step in the process because that gives you kind of an as-built configuration. This is how I was supposed to be before I started getting influenced by all those wonderful people who meant so well and meant, wonderful things for me, but ultimately the messages got a little bit skewed and or I executed them in the wrong way. An identity audit is the first place for you to start to be able to say, "Oh, no wonder." I'm very, very much, uncertainty and adventure focused, but this job is very mundane and very repeatable, and it has a high level of certainty. No wonder I don't feel satisfied with it. Along with that, and that's kind of the values based piece of it. Along with that is that, the word that I've used before, which for leaders, if you're not spending time on your emotional intelligence, you're losing ground, first of all. Every escalation in your role and your level of responsibility requires additional emotional intelligence. It is a wonderfully learnable skill. So we should all be working to develop our emotional intelligence. But that's the second piece of that puzzle, which is from an emotional needs perspective, what is being fulfilled? What is not being fulfilled? How does this job or role align with my emotional needs? And then you work to eliminate those violations and you work to eliminate those gaps from where you were to where you are and get them just better in alignment.
Hmm. Wow. That is really, really, I think, very basic. The found
Mhm.
Yes, you stress really on the emotional intelligence aspect as well. That is learnable. It is definitely learnable.
Absolutely, absolutely, and repeatable and scalable. I mean, this is work that any one of us can do because we all have an identity. We were just never taught how to tap into it, how to assess it, how to recognize it, and most importantly, how to appreciate it and love it.
Absolutely. And I'll just take 2 more minutes, Charles, because I think this really kind of gives a bit of more clarity into this topic, conversation. Is there ever a point, Charles, where too much of introspection or self introspection becomes kind of another avoidance strategy? I mean, can realigning become an excuse for inaction?
Oh, there are definitely those among us who are addicted to self help. And they're addicted to self help because of exactly what you just said, which is it feels like I'm doing stuff. I'm working so hard on myself. I read this book. I read this book. I read this book. None of that means anything if you do not put it into practice. Nothing changes until you are willing to go out and play with your identity, play with your world, make some mistakes, adjust, pivot, grow. And there are I've had plenty of clients who have come to me and said, "Yeah, I've had 6 coaches and nothing changes and this is all bunk."
Mhm,
But you're here because you know something's not right. And a good coach, a professional coach, is going to push you to serve you.
mhm.
They're not going to just placate you, because of financial motives, right? And so there are definitely those among us. And look at your bookshelf. If you are addicted to self care and you're addicted to self help, it's because you're not taking action and you're hoping that the next book or the next podcast or the next video is going to give you the secret ingredient that's going to just pop everything in your life into place. And that's never going to happen without action.
Absolutely. Super, super important. It's like the grade system. Even if you get good marks and you are successful, as per your expectations, but if
Mhm.
you're not putting them into practice, I mean, life outside is really, really tough, to be
Yep,
honest.
absolutely.
Unless you don't know how to put, your learnings into practice, those grades and marks, they don't matter. They don't. Yeah, they do. I mean, if you want to get into good college and stuff. Yeah.
They have their place. How's that? They have their place.
I'll put it in a different context. Anyway, Charles, thank you. Thank you so, so much for this really practical and a really, you know, insightful conversation. If our listeners would like to get in touch with you, what will be the best way to do that?
The best way to do that actually is just land on my website. I'm sure there'll be a link somewhere, but it's just therealcharlesbrown.com. It is Brown with an E. That's the only sneaky part to it. But I mean, that's my website. You can also find me on YouTube and LinkedIn most frequently. And I have a couple of great assessments on my website for people that are out of alignment or think they might be out of alignment. There's a couple of really great assessments in there with some really practical advice that can help anybody listening.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes. And Charles, once again, thank you so, so much. This was really a powerful conversation. And
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Absolutely.
so, listeners, if you are chasing outcomes but you're feeling empty, if the grind is numbing instead of exciting, maybe it is time to stop optimizing the wrong strategy and start asking better questions. You are not stuck, you're just out of alignment. And to connect with Charles, just refer to the show notes along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform and check out his book, The Pursuit of Identity and Purpose. And until next time, I urge all of you stay grounded, stay curious, and as always, blend your business with what matters most.